There have been multiple alleged interactions which are reported to have taken place between the US military and extraterrestrial visitors. These include the supposed crash of a UFO near Roswell in New Mexico and the craft that was encountered by US servicemen in Rendlesham Forest near RAF Woodbridge. In this episode, we examine yet another such story in which an alien trespasser is believed to have been incapacitated by sentries who was stationed at another military site, an incident which over time has become known as the Maguire Air Force Base encounter. During the early months of 2020, an unexpected series of briefing sessions was convened by the Pentagon with representatives from various global media agencies. These meetings, which were not previously scheduled, were prompted by mounting pressure from journalists demanding clarification over several unexplained aerial encounters involving military personnel. At the heart of the inquiries was the commotion surrounding an alleged incident involving US fighter pilots, and what they had captured via advanced optical and infrared sensors embedded within their aircraft. During that event, the servicemen were believed to have encountered several UFOs, later returning to base in possession of high-quality footage of these strange craft, flying at incredible speeds, executing instantaneous turns, and exhibiting characteristics not consistent with any known terrestrial aircraft. Public interest had already been fueled by grainy versions of these videos circulating on the internet for several months. Online forums, amateur analysts, and UFO researchers had dissected each frame with forensic scrutiny. But now the US government was officially confirming their authenticity and declaring for the first time in decades that the phenomena depicted were indeed unidentified. In a striking development, Pentagon officials not only authenticated the footage, but confirmed that these incidents were being investigated at the highest levels of government. Members of the United States Senate were said to have been briefed, and internal task forces had been established. Though officials stopped short of confirming the origin of the craft, the implication was clear. Something unknown had entered restricted airspace, and the military did not know what it was. Despite this apparent shift towards transparency, many observers and skeptics suspected an ulterior motive. To some, it appeared more like an orchestrated drip feed of information than a genuine attempt at disclosure. Whistleblowers from within the armed forces, past and present, continued to assert that far more dramatic events had occurred in decades prior, and that these recently publicized videos were merely the tip of a much larger, concealed iceberg. Claims have emerged over the years suggesting that the US military, far from simply observing UFOs, had actively retrieved, studied, and even replicated extraterrestrial technology. These stories, often dismissed by officials as baseless conspiracy theories, include accounts of secret installations like the infamous Area 51 in Nevada and rumors of aircraft developed using reverse-engineered alien propulsion systems. According to several whistleblowers, the knowledge gained from recovered UFOs was quietly integrated into American aerospace projects. Technologies such as radar invisible stealth coating, advanced composites, and even rudimentary versions of anti-gravity propulsion have all been attributed in some circles to alien origins. Still more controversial are the accounts of vast subterranean bases said to lie beneath the American landscape. These hidden installations, allegedly linked by a network of high-speed tunnels, are reported to house not only extraterrestrial technology, but also non-human entities, either living or preserved. There are claims of joint human-alien research programs involving genetic engineering and cross-species experimentation. Some former personnel have even alleged that deadly skirmishes have occurred in these underground facilities between military forces and alien beings, resulting in loss of life on both sides. Despite repeated denials by official channels, the stories persist. Many are dismissed as science fiction or psychological projection, but others gain traction when corroborated by military veterans with verifiable credentials, some of whom claim to have witnessed these events firsthand. To understand the story of the Maguire incident, it is important to consider the historical and logistical significance of the location. Fort Dix, located in Burlington County, New Jersey, was originally established in 1917 as a training post during the First World War. It served as a major processing and staging area for troops being sent overseas, and remained active throughout subsequent conflicts including the Second World War, Korea, and Vietnam. During that time, a small airfield which had been situated at the outer edges of the facility was expanded to create an official Air Force base, which would sit directly alongside the Army camp. This new site was designated Maguire Air Force Base and would operate alongside Fort Dix, training pilots and other aircrew who were destined for far-flung theatres of war. Both facilities would continue to work in tandem throughout the subsequent Cold War era, right up to the present day, separated from one another only by a thin barrier of chain-link fencing. Their proximity was such that security staff, maintenance personnel, and military police would often cross over between the bases in the course of their duties. The terrain surrounding the bases is largely rural, with swaths of pine forest and flat open areas interspersed with concrete runways and military buildings. It is within this context that the bizarre events in the early hours of January the 18th, 1978 are said to have unfolded. At some point during that fateful morning, staff working in the control tower of Maguire Air Force Base noticed an unexpected radar contact registering on their instrument panels. It was not beyond the realms of possibility that one of the various squadrons situated at the base might have been conducting a training flight in the early morning darkness. But the various rosters and schedules which were subsequently made available to the control room staff did not offer up any listings to suggest that this was the case. Shortly after this mysterious radar blip first registered, one of the technicians stepped out onto the external balcony of the control tower to conduct a visual sweep with his binoculars. As he scanned the horizon, he caught sight of a faint glow, an unusual, almost ethereal light emanating from the direction of Fort Dix's perimeter. But no sooner had his gaze come to settle upon this unexpected light source than it quickly disappeared, almost as if someone had just turned it off using a switch. Returning to the tower to share what he had seen, the airman was informed that at the exact same moment, the radar contact his colleagues were monitoring had also vanished. The timing was so precise that the team in the control room immediately contacted Fort Dix security, reporting the anomaly and requesting that a patrol be sent to investigate. Once the report had been made, the Air Force personnel then casually dismissed the event from their minds before returning to their individual tasks and duties for the evening, completely unaware that they had just set in motion a chain of events which would forever cement the name of their base in both military and paranormal history. After receiving the report from their counterparts at the adjoining facility, the military police on duty at Fort Dix appeared largely unconcerned by the account. No significant effort was made to mobilize a wider investigation into the alleged sighting. Instead, a single police officer collected the keys to one of the patrol vehicles and set off to carry out a visual sweep of the perimeter fencing, which marked the boundary between the two installations. Based on details that have since made their way into the public domain, The unidentified military policeman had been conducting a slow, methodical patrol along approximately half the length of the base's perimeter fencing when he suddenly brought his vehicle to a stop. To his disbelief, a flying object of some kind hovered in front of him, suspended just a few feet above the ground adjacent to one of the sections of fencing. The peculiar craft was about the same size as the marked vehicle he had been driving and cylindrical in its general shape. It appeared to be constructed entirely from metal, yet the surface emitted a muted red glow that pulsed rhythmically, almost as though it was alive and beating like a heart. Winding down the driver's side window, the sentry had paused to listen for any clue as to what kind of propulsion system the strange craft might have been using. However, the only sounds that reached his ears were the gentle stir of the wind and the faint cries of distant animals. Nothing out of place for a solitary patrol in the early morning darkness. However, his attention was soon drawn to the sound of scuffling footsteps moving quickly across the gravel-strewn ground somewhere nearby. Leaning out of the window, the soldier suddenly spotted a lone figure dashing towards the craft from out of the surrounding darkness, dimly lit by the reddish glow the object was casting. Convinced he was witnessing a foreign spy aircraft and that an enemy operative was attempting to reach it, the guard immediately resolved to take action before the situation escalated further. Leaping out of his vehicle and drawing his sidearm, the serviceman fired a single warning shot into the air, then shouted for the running figure to stop immediately and identify themselves. The craft hovering ahead of him instantly accelerated straight up into the night sky at an astonishing speed, rising vertically until it vanished from sight. With the reddish glow it had been emitting now gone, the intruder had disappeared into the shadows, prompting the soldier to scan the surrounding darkness with his torch in search of any movement. Seconds later, the sentry reacquired the figure, which had now turned around and was running in the opposite direction, directly away from the spot where he was standing. The MP immediately set off in pursuit of the intruder, carefully tracking its progress with his torch and shouting out repeatedly for them to stop moving or he would open fire. Moments later, illuminated by both the torchlight and silhouetted against the lights of the distant buildings, the soldier saw the figure jump high into the air. With surprising agility, it had vaulted over the fence line, landing effortlessly on the ground beyond within the boundaries of the adjoining airbase. Within seconds it was on the move again, sprinting out across one of the concrete runways now fully illuminated by the scattered lights that encircled the installation. Unable to follow without breaching protocol or terrain restrictions, the MP skidded to a halt and swiftly raised his weapon, steadying himself as he prepared to take aim at the fast-moving intruder. He fired 5 rounds, several of which struck the figure squarely in the torso, causing it to collapse forward and crash to the ground in an instant. Without hesitation, the army sentry rushed back to his vehicle to raise the alarm and notify the rest of his unit. He then made his way around to the main gate of Maguire Air Force Base, where he was granted entry by his counterparts. He then drove at speed to the section of runway where he had last seen the interloper. There he found a group of bewildered Air Force guards standing around a dead body, which was emitting an overpowering stench similar to that of ammonia. All those present could now see that the form which was lying there on the hard and unyielding ground before them was roughly the size of a child. Its slender frame was topped by a far larger head that was mostly devoid of any facial features save for a pair of oversized, almond-shaped black eyes. The entire body appeared to be encased from head to toe in a tough, lizard-like hide, resembling reptilian skin with a leathery texture. The strange and unsettling appearance of the lifeless intruder caused each of the assembled men to silently ponder the same questions. Who exactly had they just found trespassing on their base, and how the hell were they supposed to report it to their superiors? 40 years later, a retired major by the name of George Filer revealed in his memoirs that he had first become aware of the incident only upon arriving for duty at the base several hours after the events had unfolded. At the time, Filer had been serving at Maguire as an Air Force briefing officer. His responsibilities included compiling external intelligence reports to be delivered to senior commanders and presented to political committees within the United States Senate. Arriving at the main gate of the base at approximately 4 a.m., he was puzzled to see the headlights of several vehicles parked together out on one of the runways. Curious, Filer asked the security team at the gate why personnel were deployed out on the airfield so early. He received a strange response. One of the guards, in an almost hushed tone, told him that a sentry had shot and killed an alien earlier that morning. The remark was so unexpected and outrageous that Filer naturally assumed it was a joke. He laughed it off and carried on towards his office, located within the command post of the 21st Air Force. As he parked his car and stepped out to begin his shift, he glanced up and caught sight of a large military aircraft, a C-141 Lockheed Starlifter, descending through the fading darkness and coming into land. The Starlifter was not standard issue at Maguire, and was usually associated with the Military Air Transport Service. Its presence was notable, particularly at such an early hour. Seeing the plane taxi across the runway, Filer began to reconsider his earlier dismissal of the bizarre claim he'd heard at the gate. Not long afterwards, he was summoned to a meeting with his commanding officer. During this briefing, he was informed that the incident had indeed occurred as described. He was instructed to gather information from all involved parties and prepare a formal summary for higher command. Over the following hours, Filer conducted interviews with multiple units across the base. He spoke to several military police officers who had been on duty overnight, many of whom appeared exhausted and visibly shaken. He also took statements from personnel in the control tower who had been monitoring the radar anomalies earlier that evening. From those discussions, a consistent account began to emerge. Shortly afterwards, Filer went to collect images that had been taken of the deceased entity, but his investigation was abruptly halted. He was informed that his access to the material had been revoked. Soon afterwards, Filer was told that the decision to allow him to compile the briefing had been reversed. A change in protocol had apparently taken place, and it was now clear that a cover-up effort was being swiftly implemented. Orders were issued to restrict information and limit access to those outside a select group of authorized personnel. Nevertheless, Filer continued to pursue discreet inquiries. Through unofficial channels, he managed to gain sight of a DD Form 1569, an official incident report that had been filed in relation to the night's events. He would later learn that the body of the alleged alien had been loaded aboard the Starlifter and flown out of Maguire under armed escort. Its destination was listed as Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, long rumoured to house the remains of other unexplained recoveries. The soldier who had fired upon the entity was also flown out to Wright-Patterson shortly thereafter, where he was reportedly subjected to a formal debriefing. That individual would never return to Fort Dix. Rumours circulated that he had been transferred to a classified facility elsewhere in the United States, though no official record of such a reassignment was ever released. When Filer's autobiography was published in 2018, several journalists sought comment from the United States Air Force concerning the events described. No response was issued. Undeterred, the media reached out to the other former servicemen who had been stationed at Maguire during the same period. Their replies varied. Some confirmed that they had heard rumours of the event at the time or admitted to witnessing unusual activities on the base during the late 1970s. Amongst them was a former military policeman named Jeff Morse, who claimed he had been part of the group that discovered the body. He corroborated many of Filer's details, including the body's leathery reptilian appearance and the ammonia-like odour that surrounded it. Others dismissed the story outright. Several veterans stated that had such an extraordinary event truly taken place, it would have been impossible to keep secret for so long. 2 former commanding officers from the base were amongst the skeptics. Both insisted that no such incident could have occurred without their knowledge, and maintained that the entire affair must be based on rumour or fabrication. Yet despite the official silence and the conflicting recollections, the story has endured. Perhaps the most obvious explanation for the events of that night in 1978 is that those involved were the victims of an elaborate hoax. A long-standing tradition exists within military organisations of playing pranks on colleagues to relieve the monotony of routine duties. These jokes can be surprisingly complex, particularly when carried out by personnel with the means and motivation. It's plausible the guards on duty were so convincingly deceived by such a trick that they panicked and raised the alarm before the situation could be clarified. The embarrassment of such a misstep may have been enough for the Air Force to suppress the story immediately, fearing ridicule and criticism. No military branch wants to be seen as vulnerable to internal mischief, especially during the Cold War when perception mattered. Alternatively, the incident might not have been a prank at all, but a covert psychological or operational training exercise. It's possible the entire event was designed to test the reactions of those stationed at the base, with a scenario orchestrated by another unit and later evaluated behind closed doors. Once complete, such an operation could have been filed away, with even the participants unaware of its true nature. Allowing the incident to develop into an urban legend may have served as an intentional smokescreen to conceal the exercise's true purpose. Yet unlike many similar tales, the Maguire incident contains details that lend it a degree of credibility. Chief amongst these are the specific accounts of individuals and military units allegedly involved, several of which have since been matched to real personnel who were verifiably stationed at the base during the relevant period. This level of corroboration is uncommon, especially in stories that involve nameless soldiers in unmarked uniforms or the ever-present black helicopters lacking insignia. The inclusion of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base adds further intrigue. That facility has long been associated with the study of unconventional aircraft and unexplained aerial phenomena. During the Second World War, it became the primary destination for captured enemy technology, including German jet engines, advanced bombers, and experimental missiles. These materials were examined by expert teams, who assessed whether any innovations could be reverse engineered and adapted for US military use. Following the war, the US military launched a series of studies into unidentified flying objects. Project Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book were all headquartered at Wright-Patterson and collectively spanned more than 2 decades. Although many reports were explained as natural or man-made phenomena, some remained unresolved, and suspicions grew that the most sensitive cases were excluded from public disclosure. These connections have fueled speculation that Wright-Patterson continued its secret research, this time involving the wreckage of unidentified craft. According to some theories, the program may have evolved into a long-running effort to integrate non-terrestrial technology into military design. There have also been persistent rumours that the debris and bodies recovered from the 1947 Roswell crash were transported to Wright-Patterson for storage and analysis. Despite repeated denials, this theory remains central to much of the lore surrounding the facility. Further speculation surrounds Maguire's proximity to the Pine Barrens, a vast and mysterious region in southern New Jersey. As explored in a previous episode, the Pine Barrens has been the site of numerous reports over the years, ranging from ghost sightings and cryptid encounters to strange lights in the sky and unexplained aerial objects. The volume and consistency of such sightings have led some to believe that the Pine Barrens may be a type of geographical anomaly, a place where the boundaries between dimensions are unusually thin, allowing beings from other realities to cross into our own. Others suggest that UFOs may be drawn to the area due to its closeness to military facilities like Maguire. With this in mind, the visitors might be monitoring human activity or searching for something lost, perhaps even the remains of a fallen comrade, allegedly killed by military personnel during the 1978 incident. As with many stories involving the US military and UFOs, the truth may remain elusive without a formal admission. Consider the case of Sergeant Jonathan Lovett, who vanished in 1956 whilst on patrol near the White Sands missile testing grounds. His body was later discovered in a mutilated state, and the lone witness claimed he had been abducted by a strange aerial craft. Or perhaps the death of pilot Thomas Mantle in 1948, who crashed after pursuing a suspected UFO near Fort Knox. Mantle, a 25-year-old National Guard pilot, was one of several aircraft scrambled in response to an unidentified object. He refused to abandon the chase, which ultimately cost him his life. Both cases involve military personnel who died whilst responding to potential incursions by unidentified objects. In each, the official explanations have failed to fully address the circumstances, and accusations of cover-ups persist. This makes recent claims of transparency by the US government seem inconsistent. Whilst officials now hold press briefings and release files related to more recent sightings, they continue to obscure key incidents from the past. Until those events are acknowledged and the related files made public, we are left with fragments, witness accounts, rumours and speculation, rather than a full picture. The reasons for this continued secrecy remain unknown. Perhaps the answers lie not only in what happened that night at Maguire, but in the wider story of how such incidents are managed, hidden, or reinterpreted by those in power, long after the events themselves have passed into legend. And, if an unarmed being was indeed trying to return to its craft, only to be shot and killed before it could escape, then perhaps what followed wasn't just a cover-up, but a consequence. Not only for those involved, but for all of us. Because if there are intelligences out there, watching and waiting, who's to say how they interpreted what happened on that cold winter's night back in 1978?